Good morning, distinguished members of Armadacon. Here is the second panel of today. This will be on the mechanics of lettered artwork. And to do this, we have Gwyneth Hibbett, who is a calligrapher and illustrator, and Dawn Abigail, our poet in residence. Please give a glorious hand and we'll now begin.
Hello. As the man said, I am Dawn Abigail and Gwyneth Hibbett, and we are the creatives behind the exhibition that's in the room adjacent. So the purpose of this panel today is to go through some of the challenges and the thinking behind creating lettered artworks, and also to go through a couple of in detail to see the clockworks, how they work.
Okay. Oh, I'm getting away. Analogy for listeners to the previous talk about very short form. I didn't know what a masturbate was.
Spur socket.
So we're talking about fiction, keeping it short. So
It's short form, very much so. So just to roll backwards a bit. So I'm primarily a poet. It's actually Gwyn that got me into writing microfiction, and we'll come on to say a bit about what microfiction is in a moment. And I've been doing my poetry, keeping it mainly in a drawer as you do often with poetry for years. And I ended up with Gwyneth one day, and talked about her love specifically.
Which is what I sort of now do for a living, which I didn't do before. It was a whole new job. But there must be a way for calligraphers. A lot of things we're able to do are things like certificates and commissions, or it's lettering quotes. Because of the sort of copyrights, you end up writing quite dull stuff. There's a lot of everything. So there's a lot of biblical quotes, there's a lot of tickets, and because it's all stuff that's in the copyright rather than being in copyright. So a lot of the things that you are asked to write out, you need to write out for display. I'm not very excited or having seen before. So it was really interesting to hear what Dawn was doing in her poetry, thinking, oh, that's fresh material here, something that we'll be able to produce calligraphically that would be a bit more exciting.
I'm going to leave the chipping barn adventure hanging there and come back to that mystery, because the next slide shows a bit of some examples of the things we were doing separately. So that is a poem. I've chosen a short one, so it's all out there. So that's my art, if you like. And on the right, we have Gwyn's art.
So that's it, yeah. So the art is in the writing itself, in the presentation of the writing, the way it looks. But we're kind of interested a little bit in the way that the two worlds meet, not necessarily having the art form of the lettering, but the content of it as well.
Yeah, so that's where we were doing our separate thing. And as Gwyn was saying, she was looking for original quotes, original writing. And one lunch we had together, I just said, oh, maybe you could do some of my poems, ha ha ha. And going home on our separate train journeys, we both thought, oh, actually, that could work, couldn't it? And the next is an example of our combined artwork. So, the poem is mine. It's a very silly steampunk poem, which I shall be performing later on. And the artwork, as you can see, it is Gwyn's. I mean, with this one, I had to give Gwyn a crash course in what steampunk was and what were sort of steampunk images.
I'm sorry, I'm a newbie to all this.
Well, no, but I think Gwyn captured it beautifully there. You need with the sort of tentacle coming out of the umbrella. It was fabulous. So that's what we were doing, and we were selling these. We've got some postcards and prints we sell at previous Easter cons, and then some local shops. We're in Birmingham and that sort of thing. So that's how we started working together. But then, coming back to the chipping barnet idea, a local library at Gwyn's had spaces for 15 pieces of distinct artwork.
So you live in Birmingham, I live in London, so Barnet being a suburb of London, free library space, no commission charges. We're allowed to display what we like within reason. Oh, this is an opportunity that we could use.
I mean, that's something Gwyn is often saying. It's like, I don't realise, but in London, if you want to give your artwork to like a cafe or something, so they decorate their walls, they charge you a hanging fee. Yeah. Which just feels like taking the mickey slightly, but you know. So we were going to, And I'm very pleased to say we've done this exhibition now all over the country, and we haven't paid a hanging fee for any of it. So definitely cheapskates artists. So that's what we wanted to do. But then, rather than poetry, we got onto the idea. Well, Gwyn had the idea of doing it as microfiction. So what is microfiction?
So the attraction for me as a calligrapher is that there's not so much to write, the shorter content, and so trying to keep it small a little bit. But also it's the appeal of a very, very small story, which is, it's sort of a hook, something like a fable or something like that. It forces people to sort of sit, you've got a story there, you're giving somebody a story, which is a little bit unusual.
Well, I know you were interested because the average time that people look at an artwork is about 8 seconds, did you say?
Something like that, and I don't know whether, I think it was the Tate who did a study going around the gallery, and the average time people spend looking at his artwork is 8 seconds. And I thought, that's no, people must spend.
That's just like hating it.
Yes. Oh, there's some artwork there. Oh yeah, look.
Yes.
And
How much of that time is reading the little label as well? So that's interesting.
And that's something else I've learned with doing this, because as other poets in the audience will know, as a poet, you can write, do it on your computer. If you want to come back and change the words, you can. And then I would be sending my carefully crafted, obviously, words to Gwyn, who would then spend hours writing them out perfectly. And then, certainly an initial one, I can't remember which one it was now, Gwyn showed me one, I thought, oh, I want to change that word. We're going to spend hours, so it made me really far, far more careful about my words, getting them perfect before I sent them over to Gwyn. So
downside being analogue, you just.
But it come back to the point about, you know, people not spending much time looking at artwork. And we both like the idea that it's a story, so you have to actually read the whole thing. So you have to stand there and read the whole thing. And also that the images are integral to that. So it's not just reading the story, it's not just going, oh yes, that's pretty. You have to do both.
And also from the other viewpoint, I teach calligraphy, and often people will do, here's my piece of calligraphy, here's a picture that I'm going to put next to it. And often they just look, they look disparate. They don't look that there's been thought into the design about how it can all work together. So this is the riffing on this is a little bit of some of the challenges we were thinking about how, when we're designing some of the pieces outside, what are the things that we were trying to avoid? So a bit like the previous talk, what are the pitfalls that you could fall into when you think, oh, I'm just going to write out something fancy and maybe I'll put a bit of a picture next to it. Okay, there are other things to think about. So
in terms of microfiction, stick with the words for now, microfiction covers a range of short writing forms. And we have noticed things like I think flash fiction, sudden fiction, and microfiction. We've come across those different definitions sort of being mixed the other way around in some places, haven't we? So, but it's all different ways of saying short fiction.
But of course we were heavily influenced by somebody in the
well,
audience.
Well, we came the Drabble. I mean, if only there was someone in the audience who could tell us about Drabble.
Honestly.
I believe they were invented by, what was his name?
David.
David Wake, that was it, wasn't it? So.
Yes. So that inspirational to know that was a particular form, the short form where you got exactly.
A Drabble was exactly 100 words. I think Dave thought he was being funny at the time. You know, he often thinks he's being funny. So.
But I heard last night that some of the microfiction Drabbles are available for hundreds of pounds on eBay. So this is another thing about why microfiction could be interesting. But also, again,
it's worth in pounds per word more than anything else.
And you could get smaller and smaller and smaller. So some of these things, when Twitter before it became poisonous, or all of these things going down to even a 6-word story. Can you create a story in 6 words? So there's some rather clever.
Well, again, we found out these examples. So it's two. I'm going to do 2 6-word stories, not mine. So the first one. Bought Rose's home, key didn't fit. And the second one was, it's a nice science fiction thing, first sentient robot. Turn me off!
It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end.
But it's just 6 words. So it's interesting to explore what is possible in microfiction. I mean, we set with microfiction because our parameters were not just it fits on the page, because obviously you could have a dense type on an A4 sheet. We were restricted to A4 because that was the space that they had in the Chicken Barnet gallery. But I think it's quite interesting to restrict ourselves to a certain size, because A4 is like neither of us natural sizes from the visuals point of view.
That sort of size to play with, and you're restricted with your word count as well. It does make you focus on
every word's got a count, but also you've got to fit around the visual. For me, because I'm more of a words person, that was the real challenge in this, thinking about the visual elements. And I would invariably sort of like write the poem out and then sort of think, oh, well, I could put visuals in this, where do they go? And then you do all the visuals and you haven't got space to put them, so there's quite a lot of challenges in this. So we want to talk a bit more about the visual side of things now, and how you have a concept of the right words and the right lettering in the right place, even if you're not aware of this. And Gwyn has mocked up these delightful book covers.
It's a perfect example of how you're going to get, when you're talking about do you have words, do you have images, and book covers are a great way that you walk into a bookshop or into a convention here, you make a snap visual judgment before you've got any idea about the content, even before you read the blurb on the back. And particularly, I'm guessing that science fiction will have its own visual conventions because you have your cultural reference points where you go, yeah, got it, I even know within the genre what it is that I'm going to be buying. Am I going to be hooked by looking at this? But you're also, so you're making a visual judgment often before you read the content. So here, where the content subverts a little bit about what you would expect from
I mean, to be fair, that first one, the book that I've apparently written on cookies and cupcake recipes, I have known to react exactly that way. But if you didn't know that, then that really doesn't say recipe book, does it? So
yes, but you'd probably make a really shrewd guess when you see something. I know immediately what the genre that you're playing with here.
I mean, I like the walks to country pubs that suggest you're going to get at least spirited away by going on that walk or something. It's not, And again, the sort of medieval inks. Is there anything about that says medieval? I mean, you've got the word, but that's not, that's not a medieval book, is it?
So that's one of our starting points, that everybody's got some touch points where you've got a bit of an idea, perhaps, about how something is going to be presented.
80% is known. 80% of communication is non-verbal.
Good point. Yes, it is. Yes.
I mean, that's one of the things that working in a hospital, doing leaflets and things.
Yeah.
You have to know that it's got to be congruous.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's got to be easy to understand, because people will accept what they see before they accept what they hear.
That's a really interesting point. That so moving on to that is
yes, but before that, I mean that is. It's like they were talking about what they see. You are talking about the images and letterings on leaflets or anything, any printed publications. So to explore that a bit more. Gwyn, do you want to?
Well, I suppose that's the classic bit where you've got your image and you've got the words, and there is a disjunct, as you're saying there, and sometimes we can play about that. For us, when we're putting our microfiction together, which is going to take priority, is it going to be the word, or is it going to be the image? There's an argument, it was a TV series from the 1970s, Ways of Seeing, which says seeing comes before words, because a child looks and recognises before it can speak. So particularly the calligraphy artwork, you see, but you've got a disjunct between what it looks like and what it says. So this is something to think about when we have a piece of microfiction. Is it going to, are you going to, what are you going to take on visually? And this is something going back to the tape things, or I've often stewarded calligraphy exhibitions where there are lots of artworks around there, and people will look around and go, nice, yeah. I haven't read any of it. You don't read it because you don't really think that's pretty. And you know that if you saw a piece of calligraphy in a language you didn't understand, you could still look at it and go, oh, I like that. Except you've got no idea what it says. Anyway, so that's something. And
I think some of the artwork we've got out there, some of it is trying to have the images and the letters work together. And other than both of us, I could give you in a visual format, but then when you read it, the content does not relate to the visual format. So if you've not gone around it yet already, I'd invite you to do that. So So, and this is another of the challenges of visual artworks we're coming on to.
Is really to go the opposite way, rather than when there's a disjunct between what the text says and what the image says. Sort of graphic designer training for adults is to avoid giving an image having the same information as the word, because when you look at that, it makes you feel kid's book, or you're learning something because it gives you the text, which is the same as the information. So we needed to be careful not to be too patronising to an audience, perhaps, or someone reading it, or that our words don't over-egg a visual. There's no need to, we've got a restricted word count, we've got a restricted size, we have to be careful about the way we present these techniques.
So it's not just a question of every word counts, but all the images and that, because you have got this restricted space in which to do it. But yes, there's it's funny how that apple on the right there, I see that and my mind goes to, this sort of like alphabet you might see around the top of the primary school. That's what that says to me. So although you could say that's lettered artwork, you've got a visual and a letter, but it's not. It's very functional, and as you say, sort of childish, isn't it? Really?
Or the same sort of thing that often students will write. Here's my Christmas poem, and here's a picture of a robin. Yeah, it doesn't grab you or grab your attention in the same way, I think. But yeah.
So those are some of the underlying principles of things we had to consider when we were getting the artworks together. So a bit of just a view into how we work together. As I say, I'm more of a words background, Gwyn's more of a visuals background. And I must admit, when Gwyn said, "Oh, we've got," so this was in January. We've got this space in Chipley Barnet Library. Can we get 15 artworks together? And I was, yeah, we can do it. I was thinking I was going to do all the writing, and Gwyn was then going to do all the visuals. But it took me some time to realise that Gwyn wanted me to do some of the visuals. So it was quite a learning curve for me.
That's selling yourself short, because we met in an A-level art class.
We did. I'm not a complete doofus with art. So, but it's funny actually in terms of the look of it. It's the very first one I did in there, which was the viewpoint. It's 2 trees. I was really insecure about it. I think lacking in confidence. When I look at it now, because I've done it further enough away, I thought actually I quite like that. This is weird. But but in order to get these things together, we would separately both write stuff or draft images, because we played in Birmingham and Gwyn was in London. We'd email backwards and forwards and what do you think? I was very grateful certainly for your sort of positive enthusiasm about my early attempts with artworks. But I think it's sort of like we've kept each other going with the sort of enthusiasm of other people, of each other. And also, it's really working together like that way has helped raise the quality of everything overall.
It's interesting hearing David and James talking about their 42-year collaboration. 42 years? No, we could. But how you collaborate with another creative when you're not in the same space is an interesting dynamic about it. So we were largely communicating via email. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, because it's not always easy over email.
No, it's sort of, and we've both sort of sent things to each other person as clearly by the email, very politely thought, nah. So we have to sort of get, trust each other enough to do that as well. So, but what we're going to do now is go through 3 of the artworks that are in there, and sort of like get into the mechanics of them, go from the base of how they started until how they became the works that they are today. So, the first one we're going to have a look at is The Secret Name of the Sea. So you won't recognise that image, because that's not what it looks like now. So this started with, this actually started with, it was a longer poem I was trying to write, and I just wasn't getting anywhere with it. It wasn't working out how I wanted. So when Gwyn suggested doing microfiction, I thought, well, I'll rewrite it as a very short story and see what happens. So on the right there, that is the text that I sent to Gwyn, and then the left is the image that Gwyn first produced.
And that's probably a good example of how it's when people talk about communication, where, so I said this, and I was like, I quite like the lettering on this, sent it to Dawn, and she go, no, that's not what I had in mind at all. Because, well, two things is that you'd envisage the speaker being on a beach.
Standing on the beach looking at the sea. We obviously thought the person was in the boat looking at the sea. So, which is not clear because it's such a short piece, you can't put all the background description thing. So.
But also something to think about is that when you read the text, there's a punchline at the end of the story. It's a flip or a slightly surprise ending. When you're reading top left to bottom right, you take it in and then boom, then you get the punchline at the end. But if you're taking something in visually and you've got a punchline, your eye looks at the whole thing, your eye tends to travel around a piece of artwork, you might give away your punchline in the head. My name is Trickster is that, hey, that's the culmination of it. If I had written out my name is Trickster in a bit of a larger font, underlined it, given something away about it, you're giving away your punchline before you've told the story, which is really
we had a lot of discussions about that and what to do about it, even sort of till we put Trickster right down to the bottom right hand corner, but then that's actually going to draw your attention to it, because you'll notice that more. So it's, you know, how do you get that sort of surprise ending in something that's out there to be seen in its entirety. So that was the first iteration.
And in fact it doesn't work that well because the lettering is a bit too small and you can't see
it's
it very well.
It's a bit wobbly actually looking at it from here, isn't it? So
that's right. But it's all analog, really, rather than digital.
That's another thing that we find we both like doing, although I do on a computer and a lot of mine I've had printed rather than written. But we both like doing physical things. So anything that involves, for my mind, cutting out bits of paper or ink or actually doing it rather than just whizzing something up in Photoshop. So that was the first iteration. So then this was the second iteration.
But having said that, that's possibly what can go wrong when you start using digital things. So I wanted to have a bit of feel to it and a couple of flourishes. And in fact there is. I have given a bit of special treatment or emphasis to the punchline, if you like. But it's a bit more personal. I find it's interesting to see the same piece of text written out in a font just printed out, and how the same thing can look different and give you much more personal contact when it's done by hand. When it's obvious it's done by hand, with all the faults that come with something written by hand, you want to know it's made by a human, not by a machine. But the trouble is that sometimes when someone's thinking, oh yeah, Dawn wants it's got its beach, not out on the ocean, I'll put a photograph, one of my photographs of the beach behind it. Immediately to me it looks like a motivational poster, which just down that road. So that's again going for the obvious of having your lovely landscape with a lovely legend on the top. Doesn't always add up to something lovely. It's just like a ho-hum bit of a visual cliche. So yeah, so that one.
Yeah,
we touched that one as well.
The beach and the lettering's, you know, beautiful.
So next step along
the next step is how it actually ended up, which is this one.
Yes, it was pretty more fun to do because the way I did the analog background was to get some acrylic ink with some washing up liquid, blow through a straw, and then you can get bubbles to get a really quite nice bubbly background. So this is what we were thinking, because you've got the story, you haven't got an image which says we are on a beach. You've got something that just suggests the movement of the ocean.
Well, it's interesting this one because I said, you know, I imagined it being on a beach, you imagined it being on a boat. But actually it doesn't matter, and what you've got there is the wave crashing over you. So you know, it works, and it's up to the person can imagine where the person is, so that the viewer.
So possibly avoiding the obvious, but then I don't know. Each one of these things is a work in progress, and that's the poser art. But other people looking at things might have a completely different view on it. But that's.
So that's the secret name of the sea. Okay, I'm going to move on to another one that's out there now. Called The Fairy of Spaghetti Junction. So I've been in Birmingham for about 25 years now, and I've become slightly obsessed with Spaghetti Junction, as I'm sure everyone is. And it's just the fact that you've got all these, you've got motorways and railways, there's a canal, there's a river, and it's one of those places that is neither here nor there. You know, it's a liminal space. So to my point of view, you've got to have some spirit watching over this weird non-space. And that was the so my first attempt at coming up with a short story. Now, I like that, but it's not really a story. I mean, you could say it is because it ends with her introducing herself, but that's probably like the prologue or something, or the opening paragraph of something. It's not really, you know, then what? Nothing actually kind of happens in it. And this is when I sent it to Gwyn, and I really like this, you know, send it over to Gwyn, and Gwyn went,
Well,
yeah.
no, it's polite.
No. We are always polite. We'd still be working together. I don't think, yes, that's good. I like that. But we're not really where's the story in it? And I thought, yeah, no, you've got a point. There isn't, I don't know, it's not really a story. So, a story with something actually happening in it, perhaps. So this is the second iteration of the words. So you've got some action. Also part of the process is that I ran this past a local poetry group to get sort of like initial feedback. And because I said it was called the Fairy Spaghetti Junction, they went, well, who's the young lad? Who's Jack? Now in my mind, Jack is the English trickster god, Jack the Giant Killer. And so he's there being a trickster, getting people lost, and the spirit of the junction is talking to him. But they thought it was too confusing, and I'm perhaps getting too much in, so that's not quite how it ended up. With the guy by the centre of river water, Gwyn thought that was, talking about Spaghetti Junction. That's too sort of bucolic. But there is actually a river going through, which is part of the point. So I've changed it now and made that a bit more obvious. And the concrete forest canopy, does anyone know what I mean by that? And we're thinking about motorway junctions. Can you picture what I mean? I'm getting some nods. Well, it's the bridge, yes, exactly, because again, someone in the poetry group went, forest, Spaghetti Junction. If you go under a motorway, you've got these massive concrete columns that are holding up the motorway. In my poet brain, those are trees, it's a concrete forest. So that's where that comes from. So there's things I like about in there, but it's still, it's not quite there. So I moved to start looking at the image, and this was my concept. So I had the idea of, the green men you see in churches, but instead of leaves and foliage coming out of his mouth, it would be motorways and railways and canals and sort of, more urban stuff. So I used that very little book, but very good book by Mike Harding. It's just got lots of images of different green men. And then for the actual motorway junction, that's an A to Z with Spaghetti Junction in it. I find that easier to use than Google Maps somehow. I don't know, it just the level of detail was wrong if you tried printing off a Google Map, so that's just had it right. And when I was drawing it up, I had great fun in, to a certain extent, doing very slowly and carefully, matching Spaghetti Junction so it is accurate, and then thinking, so where do I want this motorway to go? Well, I can have it go whee, because it's a fiction. I can have it go where I like. So it's a weird mixture of highly accurate and complete fantasy.
Sounds like Google Maps.
Yeah. So the next, this is the first draft of the image. So I've got the head in the middle there, and the words there, I've literally just written them out on paper by trying to work out where they go or where they would fit. And the balance of that is clearly not right because you can't actually see the image.
But there's also consideration that we as a convention read from top left to bottom
yes,
right.
that's something we've always had to consider in where to put things. You can't just litter it around, so the story has to start at the top left. Ish, and end at the bottom right, so you know. And this one, well, you can see I've started to look at that there. I thought, given I want the words to be motorway signs, I can actually use the arrows and motorway signs to tell you which way you should be reading. So this is how it ended up. And that's in the other room.
Lettering sort of not so the typeface that you used as a particular font is the one called Motorway, which I didn't realise it was designed by Margaret Calvert in 1958, and the way that they figured out what a great font it was to use on the motorway was to do different versions of this and get people to drive past at speed and go, oh yeah, I couldn't read that. sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and the colour of it, I mean, initially, to get the colours right, I just obviously downloaded an image from the internet, but then when I came to print them actually out, they're printed out and stuck on the ink artwork behind it. I don't know why they just suddenly started printing out a different colour and we could not work out what was going on. So I ended up, I don't actually know if that's the correct colour. but I ended up with one that looks right and fits the tone of the rest of the image. So I'm quite happy with what I've ended up in the end. And if you notice at the bottom, so we've got, I made reference to the river, but maybe being specific about it's a river I hadn't known was there, because a lot of people don't know there's one there, so I'm just using that as part of the explanation rather than to amuse people in terms of what's going on. So that was the Spaghetti Junction, and now we're going to go on to our latest and newest piece.
So just say that some of the things that mainly Dawn does the content, the words and the text, and I'll do the visuals if you like, but sometimes we swatch it around, so the Fairy Spaghetti Junction was all of yours and this one is all of mine because I do some of the writing as well as some of the imagery. And this one I hope is just to be able to give a little bit extra to the viewer rather than just being constrained with our A4 format, because we can sort of break out from that.
Now we've done the chipping bar.
And now we can go outside A4, so that we're looking at perhaps artists' books. So the one that this particular piece is done in 2 formats because you have to read the story. So I'm not going to give you a spoiler. You have to read the story to see what it says. But it's about the birthday parade, that's the title. So the concertina book gives you space to be able to stretch out a story like a parade, but also done another version where it is on a placard, because again, without thinking the content of the story, it is about a protest. And I'm going to leave you in charge of this, because some of the best, and I think this is interesting as a complete side issue about why the best protest banners are handmade rather than printed. And again, it's probably something to do with, it's personal. I've written with a marker pen on a piece of cardboard. It's going to often in a protest situation. Get your opinion over a bit more than the most beautifully printed piece, because it's something a bit more visceral. So I wanted to be able to use some of the imagery of just being able to choose the look of the thing.
And you do get people get quite creative on banners on protest marches. Yes. I saw one once when I was on there which said, "What do we want? Time travel. When do we want it? It really doesn't matter." I mean, this was on a sort of, anti-environmental impact march. But someone's clearly taking the time to, be entertaining and amuse themselves while they're out that. So.
All that sort of thing.
But you're right, it's with these, someone has taken the time, I think the one on the right looks printed.
Yes.
It's more,
I think it's,
but the one on the left, someone has taken the time to just sit down and physically write it. It's more sort of a human way of expressing yourself. So.
Which is what I was thinking. So, yes, I used lino prints to use that to try and echo some of the things that printed on cardboard in the background. But this is an example to me about how it isn't just text illustration, because it isn't an illustration, because part of the story is on the banners, and when you read it, that's the giveaway. It wouldn't make any sense if you didn't read what was on the banners. So there's a little bit of wordplay on there, the handmade feel, and we've got a little bit of.
So you can read it this way, or depending on where the people in the demonstration are placed, you can read it this way.
So we've got a bit of anagrams, and again, calligraphers always like a little bit of wordplay. And I suppose for those who are complete lettering nerds, this is in a different environment perhaps to the next one.
Well, I mean, so the lettering, actually, if I just go back to the, so that lettering there on the birthday parade, any guesses about what the name of that lettering, that font might be? Oh, I said font now, and Quinn will have to have words with me, so issues with the
Calligraphers don't use fonts, no scripts. Fonts are printed things, they're the same every time.
German Gothic.
German Gothic, it's got a German element to it, so it's, really.
On the right track there.
Go forward.
The name of the font I used to copy my handmade version is Trump. Deutsch. That's an in-joke. That is an in-joke.
Very in-joke, isn't it? I don't know why it was called Trump.
Don't know.
Yes, it brings it together, doesn't it?
It's getting microfiction as a visual thing. This is why the exhibition is called Show and Tell. You're showing the story, you're telling the story, but you've got layers in there.
So, we've just got a couple of more slides to sort of conclude really, and then obviously we're open to any questions. This is sort of some other artists who are doing similar things. I don't know if any of you have seen the one on the right. I mean, the one on the right is familiar to me, not so much the one on the left.
Yes, I know the other way around. Paper cut artist Rob Ryan, who does lovely little. Again, it's a little story. It's a little story, but it's entirely encapsulated in. And this one, I think, the lino print. But yes, all of it works together and hangs together to be able to keep it in one piece of artwork.
Yes, you've got the story, and I think thinking about it, interesting, because he does the same. You logically start reading at the top.
Yes.
And then you go down, don't you?
But not always. Sometimes if you ever read a manga cartoon, that really it's not your vision can. Oh, I'm reading it the wrong way round. You can move words around. It doesn't have to be linear. You can do some interesting things, writing in spirals and things. But it has to make sense. So even I'm just looking at your sweatshirt, that you can see designs and things like that. It doesn't have to be line, line, line. But it does have to flow, so somebody knows what on earth you're talking about, whether it's a t-shirt design or a piece of microfiche.
I have got interested myself. It's such a rabbit hole you can go down with lettering on clothes, because people these days wear, other than sort of logos and slogans and things, they wear designer clothes. I was doing some exam invigilation, looking at students' clothing, so there's nothing much else to look at. And there's a label, I suppose it is, I don't know, called supply and demand. And he had that written down the arms of his sweatshirt. And I just started thinking, well, you know, that is, they are using lettering as decoration there. It's the logo of the company or whatever, I've no idea. But increasingly you do see items of clothing where lettering is used as decoration.
Tattoo design as well. Tattoo design, if you look at Robbie Williams' tattoos, that's one again, they make calligrapher's with German Gothic. I think he says, I love mother or something. And he's done it all in capitals and all going, no, never do that. It looks awful. But yeah, anyway.
And with the Great Bear, it's interesting because it's something which clearly is the London tutor. Yeah. But he's taken it and just changed all the names, changed the line names. And he said sort of, there's no code to decode here. That's the artist of that one is Simon Patterson. So he's not trying to put over some arcane knowledge. At the same time, he's talking about some in-jokes. And I did look at that, and the circle line is all philosophers. I wondered if he was making a point there, I don't know. But his particular interests are, what interests me is juxtaposing different paths of knowledge to form more than the sum of their parts. I'm not sure I'm showing exactly what he means there, but it's sort of like, again, you've got...
Good.
Yes. Yes, we will be developing comments like that to
yeah, I think that's what we're doing
definitely,
as well.
yeah, you're definitely doing that. Just to conclude...
what are your conclusions?
Well, certainly what this whole project has given me is such an increased awareness of lettering in all its context, on banners, on flyers, on book covers. If you start actually open your eyes and walk about, you see it in so many different places, and the thing that the style of the lettering is telling you as well as the image, it's really sort of like opened up a world for me. It's also, I blame Gwyn for this, I now cannot look at certain book covers, fonts, and other things that I would really notice when the spacing between those letters is dreadful. And that's not the right for. Oh no, it's made me really sensitive to these sort of, lettering issues.
Yeah.
But what I would say, one of the great things about this, and we have had feedback from people that when they visited the exhibition, they have literally gone away and tried it themselves. So this is one thing I'd say, do try this at home and just play around with images and lettering, whether it's just stuff you want to do on the computer or get splishy with some ink, whatever.
So yeah, microfiction, very accessible as a short form. I mean, you wouldn't say it's easy because every word's got to count, including the title as well. When you said about with the masquerade, sorry, I didn't know what a masquerade was before, but part of it is the walk-on, then part of your microfiction, the title is part of it.
I did this whole masquerade performance once with Tom Nansen, actually Shoba, who's James' wife, who's here. And I didn't even know what the punchline was before the end of it. We came on between various masquerade entries, and Tom had directed us that there was this Shoba, this lady sitting there with a lovely hat. and we had to sneak on wearing fatigues and quite unbeknown to her put a flower in or something and then sneak off. And at the end of it he announced, and that was millinery manoeuvres. Yes, certainly, so that, you know, the words there being integral to the, and when you know, we drew up these art forms, and then because you've got so few words, you've got to make use of the title. It's not just point saying, you know, oh, a pink image with green or something. You know, you've got to make use of that.
Because it's all.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. So
I suppose, yes, I've got my conclusions. When we started, my thought was that if you marry some lettering art with the microfiction, you can spend longer and slow things down, because we used to sort of scanning and scribbling and skinning and scrolling things that we're very visual, but you don't always take the time to slow things down and to digest what you're looking at and what you're reading. I'm not sure. I think the balance of looking might outweigh the balance of reading, perhaps.
I think it does, but I think that's something that we're trying to, I suppose, counter in terms of if you really want to, you can look at it, but it is a story. So I would hope that if you start reading it, then you actually do what's there.
Sure.
It's not a novel. It's not hugely demanding. You know, you don't have to commit hours and hours of your time. It's just 5 minutes. Not even that will do.
Yeah.
So,
and also, I was thinking about the context where you look at something, about whether you spend more time looking at something in a gallery, maybe with chin stroke, or maybe it's just 8 seconds and you wander around.
Yeah,
So it might depend on context, whether you have a piece of microfiction in front of you and spend time looking at it, or whether you just read it quickly and move on. Anyway,
it's a topic that, it's so much in it, and there's so much more still to be explored, I think. So,
yes.
Yes, we keep having ideas, that's the problem.
It is good thing, yes.
So that's the formal part of the presentation. So thank you for listening. And has anyone got any questions?
2 parts to this one. Number one, I converted from a scientist to health and safety. And one of the things I was sent on was how to present health and safety to the workforce. And as you just pointed out, we were informed by the person giving the course, you have 10 seconds to grab a person's focus for a poster.
Yeah.
Only 30% of people read a poster.
Yeah.
And as you said, you've got to kind of grab it. And one of the best examples it gave was a 1933 American one. You've got a big fish and a little fish, and there's a hook with a word on it in the corner. And it basically says, give younger staff safety tips.
And that's interesting, because obviously I was going to thought you were going to say no fishing or something. There's absolutely nothing to do with it, but it's visually striking. It gets the message across.
Yeah,
so.
you see the fish.
Yeah.
Then you see the hook and the worm, and then finally you see the give the younger staff the safety tips required.
Interesting.
So the other one is I subtitled, and on about imagery and the words. The punchline was the king basically said, I sent my best warrior after the dragon. What did they do? They ended up getting married. Now, that could all be said on one frame under the title. But visually, they played it out over a couple of frames later. So I played out the statement as well. So the punchline was on the final frame where you see this dragon running off with the one warrior. And therefore, you've got both the visual and the text punchline.
Yeah.
It took me nearly 3 months to subtitle this with a stopwatch, laserdisc and such like. And the only thing that really pleased me was a few years later they produced an official subtitle, and they just put it as a slab of words underneath the thing and totally missed the other.
Oh, no. See, that could be a piece of microfiction, couldn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh gosh, that in itself is a short story.
Yes.
I sent my best warrior. What happened? The dragon married. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And the imagery had it.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about trying to marry text and
marry the text. The other one was the 5,000 word a minute announcer at the sports event. You took the text and you just filled up the entire screen. Trying to get that down into microfiction.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah. So
particularly interested in the way that different styles evoke different feelings. And in particular, with so lino cut and paper cut. So next door you've got a piece about the black dog, which obviously as a folklorist is a piece that I have to look at first, which is done in that style. I've just written a book for the National Trust, which is about the traditional customs and events that take place throughout the year, and the illustrator that they commissioned to illustrate that book used lino cut for that. The Right to Roam protests, and particularly across Dartmoor, a lot of their protest imagery, and you've had similar with the forest, uses lino cut. And it evokes this feeling of a traditional past and, you know, people burning religious policemen in winter effigies and stuff like that. But why? Why does it evoke that feeling?
Possibly because of your visual culture and the things that you recognise. So when I think of lino cut or possibly woodcut, then you go back to perhaps historical broadsheets, but thinking about your witch's book where you'd have a wood engraved image of a witch and which find general images and particular text. It evokes a particular... Yeah. And it's all...
we use lino cut because we don't do woodcut very much.
Right.
Because it's something that you can learn in schools where you don't do. So you get a similar texture without...
Which isn't clean and sanitised.
No, and you get less detail, but you get more imagery.
Yes.
But I think it's interesting that a lot of the environmental protest groups have picked up on that particular art form as being, you know...
It can also be printed.
Yeah.
Because you've got the handmade printed.
It's the antithesis to a very sanitised, AI-generated, very clean-lined image, which isn't the image you're trying to convey.
I mean, I think, you know, I'm sure you can in Photoshop do your lino cut and everything. But so we associate something that looks like a lino cut. You've got somewhere in your head that image of, well, let's say lino cut and wood cut and printing looks similar. Someone physically cutting it out. So you've got a human being there, which with any sort of perfect thing, you know that's just, I don't know, it's all loads of ones and zeros. Who knows? But yeah.
But you've got an internal reference library for all of those things. So
it goes back to the childhood days of Grimm's fairy tales and things, doesn't it?
Yes.
So you've already got that.
It's part of your reference points inside your head. Yes.
We found out there's a whole academic field of sort of visual imagery, or visual, what is it they call it, Wade? Visual language? But they're looking at lettering specifically in the visual cultural context and what things mean to people.
Yes, and how you can play with that throughout, yes.
That's what they're doing advertising.
Yes, advertising and poster design is perfect. Thinking about, and you can think of iconic poster art that then gets bastardised and changed, and people will I saw some gorgeous sweatshirt yesterday which would have the cats, the sort of Parisian one with the black cat on the version of it, where you think of Bob Dylan, a poster with his sort of rainbow hair, immediately you know what's he's talking about, and then you take that and use that imagery because kind of you know what you're talking about, but only particularly within a reference, but it might not mean something.
No, and you've got to think, I mean, in Western culture that might, but it might have some different reference in another culture. I think,
I find this really interesting because to start off with, I work in communications now, and I think it's but the other thing is, I'm more diverse, but also I had to relearn certain aspects of speech and language after stroke, so things got refreshed, and now I can be unashamedly, when you're a diverse self, when I look at something, I am now not scared of saying the difference, because how I interpret things is completely different, you can see, to how everybody else does. But the other thing as well is I've got a touch of dyslexia and my eyesight got really bad and buggered up. So now there are certain things I can see in terms of fonts. I love old-fashioned handwriting and things like that. But I love the variety, but it's what you can do. And you can fit it with the style, but also I find the style goes with the story. But it's the whole aspect of how broad the interpretations can be. But gotta say, I absolutely adore old-fashioned 1800s handwriting to the point to the point where I now have very, very secure ways of taking notes. My manager said, "Why would people see things in your notebook?" And then he looked, it's like, I can't read that.
So are you writing copper plate now?
I do tend to write a lot of, I've got different types of handwriting styles. It depends on how busy I am. But yes, yeah, it can be copper plates, it can be, depends on the pen as well. But I just love when someone says, can you write something, can you draw something? I also taught myself my own style of script that I write with. And sometimes it's better than others, but the way of doing capitals. So they'll say, could you please write place cards? I write it.
Oh, lovely.
And I love that, but also it's making it clear enough, but also individual enough. But I just love seeing the sheer individuality. I think it's just such a broad spectrum. And to circle back to what I said previously, I just love how there's so much interpretation, especially in terms of neurodiversity.
Really interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
The power of the handwritten.
That's reminded me of something, because one of the advantages we've had of working together is that our work gets seen in environments where it never would be. I mean, this is Gwyn's first time at a science fiction convention, so her work has come here. And ages ago now, Gwyn, being a calligrapher, is interested, amongst other things, about copper plate writing. And we were cover plates for the Copper Plate Review. Sorry, we were cover girls, that's what I meant to say. On the back cover was one of my poems that Gwyn had beautifully written cover plates. So, I mean, there's no way that my work was ever going to be read by...
Just leave it. We were just cover girls.
Who on the cover?
Cover plate special group. Yeah. But yes, it goes into just being able to do things by hand and all of those.
Yeah, get physical.
Going back to ancient days, I was actually taught copper plate with an ink pen.
Oh yes.
That was how I was taught to write.
Oh yes, and that,
And we used to have to do it, big passages out of Shakespeare. And my father would look at it and go, it's beautiful, it's lovely every which way, but which way is that?
That's the thing. I was quite interested that you said about copper plate, because I find that it's really difficult to read copper plate. Obviously, for you, so it is interesting.
It's taken me a lot to understand it, but it's what you get used to. So also, it's like looking at art itself.
Oh yes, no, the words are art. Yes.
It's interesting that learning lettering at school does
Well, it wasn't lettering, it was how I was taught handwriting.
Yeah, but that isn't taught in the same way in schools at all.
They don't even hold pens like that.
No. In fact, some of the historical documents, probably ones that have been written in a copper plate script, when they're trying to digitise the family history of something in the States, they have to get older people to come and translate it because some of the kids will do it. I don't know what it says.
One of the things I do in a museum, I volunteer in a museum, is one of the things, as an older person, this person brings in, has brought out, done a diary and a contract, has written this beautiful copper plate handwriting that nobody younger can read. And I'm the person who sits there translating it.
So a lot's being lost in terms of,
And the man's waving at me, so we should have one.
Citizen science. Basically, the weather logs from naval ships from 1700 up to 1800, all in copper plate.
Well, I think on leaving us thinking about that beautiful handwriting, we shall leave it there. So thank you very much. Yes.